Good. Good. I think we started. Good. Well, it's good to see you again, as always. And the one thing that comes to mind, I think I said it in the review, was you're not a lazy guy, but you're always reinventing yourself.
Thank you very much, Ty. Yeah, try to.
No,
This was further out of my wheelhouse than I have been in a long time, but I really
yes.
enjoyed it. I
Yeah,
think last
I
time
could
I was
see
this far out was looking over 55 horses on the Pendragon TV show and thinking this is really exciting, but I've never done anything like it before in my life.
that. That is great. That is great. So let me just introduce. This is Mark from Taekwondo Life. We are talking again today to director, extraordinaire writer, stuntman, stunt director, fight director, Renaissance man, Jesse V. Johnson, about the new film that's coming out at the end of this month, I think on the 29th, Above and Below. And aside from the fact that it's an action film and has Louis Mandylor in it, it has a lot of elements that are not necessarily, and we talked about that in our review, which will hit on the 27th. It has a lot of elements that are very different from some of the other films that you've gotten involved in. So tell me, in the limited time that we have, how'd you come to be involved or associated with this picture?
I was on Thieves Highway with a producer, and he said, "Oh, you should take a look at this shark film I have coming up. It could be interesting for you." And why would anyone think of me for a shark film? What possibly in my resume makes you think that? And I read the script, and the first reaction was fear. The fear of having to take on something that I wasn't used to. There's no martial arts. There's no heroics. You're dealing with college kids who are, on a final bash, running into, drug dealers, and then the added sort of, factor of sharks in the water. And then the more I thought about it, the more I realized this is exactly what you do with, as an artist, you have to do it. You have to put yourself into a scenario where you're unfamiliar, you have to dig deep and find out what it is that works there. I mean, I love these movies. I just finished binge watching 2 seasons of White Lotus, which it's a
Sure.
guilty pleasure with my wife and my daughter at the time. We loved it, and it was so. And I thought, well, you really enjoyed that. Let's bring a little bit of that interplay and character development, and just workshop with the actors. I watched a lot of shark movies, and the one factor that unified all of the bad shark movies was you had no sympathy for the human characters. If you have no sympathy or no interest and no empathy for the human characters, who cares? You end up rooting for the sharks by the end of it. And by the way,
Sure.
that's the vast majority of shark movies, is they're not very good. They're directed by directors who are not very good with actors. They're usually special effects directors who've got the gig, or stunty types, like me.
Right.
And so I decided, I'll do this, but I'm going to do it if we get a chance to really put actors in there whom I can trust, who will bring multiple layers to, or bring some baggage to their roles, and make these guys interesting to the point that you're like, you forget that you're watching a film with sharks, and you really dig and want to know what happens with these characters, much akin to an episode of White Lotus where you're not really sure what the film's about, just what each of the characters is interesting you. It's dragging you into their life and their story and their drama. And so for that, it was a challenge that I hadn't went into before, and I thought, let's do it. This is really, really interesting. And then as the cast came together, I really fell in love with all of them. I really, really like working with Laura, a consummate professional. She's an old soul. She like dealing with a 50-year-old experienced actor in a young person's body of because she's been doing it since she was 6 years old, working on studio television shows, which are the highest pressure cookers you can imagine, and is able to think about her place in the production as a character with dialogue, but also as a piece of the machine. Well, if I do that, then the lighting's not going to work over there, is it, Jesse? And the ship is pointing the wrong way, so I'll have to wait till this afternoon to do my coverage. And it's like, yeah, absolutely, you're absolutely dead on. I think she's either going to become an extraordinary director or a producer at some point as well. I think she is producing. So very, very impressed with working with her. Antonio was a career highlight, and he's just so good. I think he brings so much to the
He was
part.
terrific. He was really unexpected in terms of the performance is a little bit different for him, and it was really well crafted. He was just coming up to the edge of being over the top, which is based upon the character, but really, really sold it. And I think in a way that really made the character very, very memorable. And I thought it was a really good performance. I really thought he was really he's always good, but the role is a little different for him. So I thought he was surprisingly good in it.
Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate that. There was the limit of my directing with Antonio. You don't really direct a big actor like that. You don't go, talk, this is, you talk about it a little bit beforehand, and then, if there's any changes, you make sure you give them to him early on, and then you watch what he does. The limit of my directing, I think at three occasions, I looked over at him, he looked back at me, I went a little over the top, didn't I, Jesse? And I'm like, just teeny tiny bit, because you're really treading carefully. For God's sakes, you're not going to tell Antonio Banderas he's going over the top. But he offered it back to me, and I'm like, just a big smile. Oh my God, I have that problem sometimes. And then the next take was much closer to,
He
you
hit
know,
the mark. He definitely hit the mark.
and that's when you're working with the good actors and that you have a connection with. Is that little moment where they look around the camera and you have that moment. I direct very much from the camera. I'm next to the camera. I hardly ever watch the monitor. I think that's one of the worst things you can do on an actor-based film. You want to be there and be the audience, especially on this one, as there's a lot of different languages being spoken. And the actors are acting in English. They want to know whether it was a good performance. And a lot of time, it's not about saying that's great or even a thumbs up. It's just a nod, and you go into the next one, and they can you get a shorthand by the end of it, like I do with Jess and Tim and Louis, who I have all worked with multiple times in the past, where they know if they're going off the rails a little bit or too
Sure.
subject. You have it, you have that. You don't actually have to sort of gesticulate and take them offset with your arm around your shoulder. They know it without even really having to say. Lewis will look at me and go, I didn't do it good, and I wasn't quite right that time, was I, boss? And I don't even say anything. It's great direction, good direction. I got it. Then we'll
That's
go back
great.
and
That's
change it.
perfect.
So
That's a good connection. So
when
so
I say they
it's
make you feel like a good director, that's
That's perfect. That's so Lewis, of course, it's no secret from the reviews that we've done that we always enjoy the work that he's done, and I know he's started to do some directing and things. But was he attached to this project when you took it, or did he become attached as a result of your relationship with it? Because his performances, of course, is always great. It's great in this one, but I was wondering if it was something that you guys came on together, or was it which one came first?
Jess, Lewis, and Tim are my guys. I brought those guys in and had
It
to,
was great.
had to battle and shoehorn them in, and there's always resistance, because they want to hire someone from the local village, so they don't have to pay for hotel or
Right, right, right.
and they're like, this guy is fantastic, and the guy from the local village is usually okay. He's done some theatre in the park or something like that, and can string a sentence together in English. But making a good movie requires good actors, very
the,
very
the
good
the thing
actors.
about Lewis is that almost in anything that I've seen him in, every scene that he's in is you're always going to get something good out of it. It's like whether he's in a very short part of a film or he stars in it, it's every scene has got some value to it. It's very highly watchable from the standpoint of an audience, and you can't help but enjoy it. So I think it's
He's
always a good
phenomenal.
choice.
I love working with him. When he arrived, he'd had to come. The flight to Canary Islands goes via Madrid and then to Gran Canaria, and then it's a long trip from the top of the Canary Islands down to where we're filming. And he was exhausted. He was beat up. He was really, he'd been working the night before he flew, so he was and he sat down with me at breakfast and he went into a spiel about how he hates the ocean, he hates sharks, he doesn't want to go anywhere near the water,
Maybe not a best good project for
he
him then.
hates everything to do with it. And this monologue went on for 15, 20 minutes. I'm eating my English breakfast, listening to this, and he realizes I'm not talking, and he sort of slowed down a little bit because he gets very self-conscious, and oh God, he can't believe what he said because now he's doing a shark movie in the water, for 3 weeks and then 2 weeks underwater. And I laughed and I said, everything you've just said, I'm going to write down. I'm going to go to my hotel room now and I'm going to write it down, and you're going to say it in the movie.
That's
And
great.
we burst into laughter. And he says pretty much verbatim his complaint to me when he got to breakfast at the hotel in this film. So when he's
That's
talking
great.
how he hates sharks, how he goddamn hates the ocean, that's all Lewis. That's his contribution to the
That's
screenplay.
perfect.
I loved it. I thought that was fantastic.
Terrific.
Louis is someone who's lived life, and I like actors who have lived life outside of the struggle of acting. The struggle of acting is wonderful, and the study of theatre and dramatics and playwrights and the form is wonderful. And I also love working with those actors. But Louis has had a life outside of that, and it allows him to pull on references to characters he grew up with, you know, who were either real gangsters or boxers or football players. And I know when he's doing that because I see it, I see them creep in. And we don't talk about it because you've got to be careful as a director to talk about that stuff because then the actor becomes aware of it and it's no longer subtle anymore. Now it becomes something he's aping. But I see it happen, and it's a magical thing that happens, and I love it. I love
So that
working.
that leads to something for me when I watched the movie that I thought was starkly different from most of your films about that element, which is that the main characters, the stars, Laura, your characters tend to be in the films that you do, they tend to be people who seem to have really maybe even sort of beaten up a little bit by life, and they seem to be sort of sometimes counter, heroes or anti-heroes. He's a perfect example, Scott Adkins in Savage Dog or in Accident Man. But the characters here are very different in that there's a little bit more purity to them, right? They're a little bit more innocent than many of the characters. Did that change the approach for you in terms of how you approach the subject matter?
100%. Yeah, it was very, very different for me. And, you know, I have to, as a director, I have to be obedient to the script. I can't go flying off and making these guys drag addicts and ex-gangsters. They were written as college kids who were, you know, who are going off into the world. And as a college kid, there's an innocence, you know, there can be a false, you know, worldliness to you, which, you know, the kid that's the gambler has, and he's got a little bit of problem going on. But for the most part, these are kids who don't have a vast amount of life experience. They're finding their way. They're creating who they're going to be in their adult life. And it's, you know, it was something I hadn't done before. And it was exciting to do this, to go somewhere that I'm not familiar with. And you're absolutely correct. Most of my characters have lived a life. They've been beaten up by life. You know, the
Sure.
cauliflower ears is that Jess Liauden has are real, you know, and that's a metaphoric, you know, simile as well. You know, they're not only physically beaten up, but emotionally and mentally beaten up. But yes, the four leads in this were not supposed to be like that, and we worked hard to make sure that they came with that youthfulness, and it was interesting for me. It was good. It was a good exercise for me to do that, and I enjoyed it. You know.
It was really well handled, I think, and it was interesting to me as somebody who's familiar with your work. The other part of this is in doing. We talked earlier on that about doing the fact that the sharks are prominent in the film, right? That's a different type of photography. It's a different type of choreography.
Absolutely.
It's a different type of editing, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So from the standpoint, I would assume that was uh, more of a team approach for you, although I'm sure you got educated on doing this, right? That there's a different approach to dealing with a team when it comes to dealing with this type of special effects and practical effects.
Yeah, it's you know each film you do is very different. I knew that from stunts. We've worked in so many different areas that you have to establish a protocol and a routine and a safety, you know, safety protocol very very clearly up front. You know, you have to safety divers for each person, the amount of time they can be underwater for. But I'll cut back to the other part because I think there's a hair more I should say in you know especially as we're talking about how this film and why people should see it. You know, this cast had to qualify, and so what I wanted to do was make sure they all took their PADI tests together, which is 5 days of study with 2 days diving at the end. 3 days of study, 2 days diving in the sea, and I wanted them to be together for that, so that they would start this sort of group think. And I encouraged them to go out together, to hang out, to drink, to get in trouble, because they had a week prior to filming where they got to do all of this stuff. And I went with them. I didn't go in the water with them. I didn't want there to be a paternal aspect to me being there and watching. I wanted them to be with the instructors on their own and to get in trouble and to get scared and get worried, see who was nervous. We had one lad who was an ex-stuntman amongst them, Ryan, who's very muscular and very strong. And I thought for sure he was going to be the alpha potato and showing everyone else. He ended up being the one that was terrified and nervous, and he didn't like the mask, and his ears kept popping. And so they all made fun of him. And finally, he got down to 30 meters, and he was like, I'm doing it, yes. But it was the exact opposite to what I would have introduced as a dynamic as an action director, and I love that happened. And these kids all grew. They became quite annoying because they kept partying every night till like 1 or 2 in the morning, and eventually I
So
could
it's
hear
a
in
very
my
good
hotel room.
team building exercise there.
Yeah, so then the team building was like, shut up and go to sleep. We all got to get some sleep. But the idea was that they created as much of that dynamic as possible, so that when I put the camera on them, I just kind of encouraged it and poked them a little bit, and then the sparks flew because they all knew each other quite well by that point, and had been rehearsing like crazy. And then I threw them off by saying, no, don't do it that way, do it this way. And you could see them all sort of helping each other out, and that was important to me. I did my best with that because you can sense when there is no real uh,
Sure.
connection between actors.
There
So
was chemistry for sure, and I could sit and talk to you all day, but I think we have a certain amount of time allotted. So what I will say is the finished product on it, as always with you, is very very good. It's a highly watchable film. There was a lot of thrilling moments in it. It does a great balance of being an action thrill film and a shark film, and it balances those things really well. It's a fast move, and I definitely wish you all the success with it. And I look forward to hearing the response to it. Our review will drop on the 27th. I think the film opens on the 29th, and we look forward to hearing more about what's coming for you in the future. So, and it's always good to talk to you.
thank you, Mark. You're always such a great supporter. I am truly indebted to you. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. Keep pumping out great work. We'll keep giving them good reviews. So
I'll do my
thank you,
best. I'll do
thank
my
you,
best.
Jesse. I really appreciate it. I wish you all the
Thank you.